Hey everybody, Rick Howard here, the CyberWire's Chief Security Officer and Senior Fellow. I want to remind you that I will be hosting the CyberWire's Quarterly Analyst Call this Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've invited two experts to the CyberWire hash table to discuss the most impactful stories from the last 90 days. As regular listeners, you know that the cyber news comes in fast and furious and in large volumes. It's hard to tell what's important and what's not. In this show, we're going to hit a pause button and try to figure it out. Come join us. It's always fun and entertaining, and you might learn a thing or two. You can register at the CyberWire's website. Just click the register button at the top of the page that says CW Pro Q3 Analyst Call, and I hope to see you there.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud. Stolen credentials are an open door to your corporate assets. SpyCloud is the world leader in recapturing breach data and making it actionable to prevent cyber attacks. SpyCloud solutions protect your employee's identity and prevent criminals from using employee credentials to commit account takeover, data breaches, BEC, and ransomware attacks. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire to check your breach exposure now and see how global businesses are using SpyCloud to negate the value of their employees' stolen data. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. Distributed denial-of-service attacks have been making a comeback, and many of them represent criminal extortion attempts. A major British payroll provider is recovering from a cyber attack. Russian authorities arrest the founder of Group IB on treason charges. Johannes Ullrich from the SANS Technology Institute on out-of-band phishing using SMS messages. Our UK correspondent Carole Theriault wonders how online trolling is still a thing. And NSA and CISA release guidelines on secure use of VPNs. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, September 29th, 2021. Distributed denial-of-service attacks appear to be returning as a significant, if episodic, nuisance. Atlas VPN puts the number of DDoS attacks in the first half of 2021 at a record 4.5 million. The attacks were highest in January, tapering off a bit by June, but not by that much. The regions most affected are in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, but the increase has been observed in most parts of the world. Ars Technica last week summarized a denial-of-service attack against Canadian telecom provider VoIP.ms, based in Quebec, that's interfered with the company's ability to provide voice service to its customers. The DDoS incident appears to be criminal in nature, since the affected company has been approached by hoods demanding a ransom that's fluctuated between $42,000 and $4.2 million, which suggests a certain amateurism with respect to the criminals' placement of decimal points. The criminals say they're from REvil, the well-known privateering ransomware gang, but that seems unlikely, a little like the neighborhood goon trying to scare people by claiming he's a wise guy from the Masucci family. Earlier this month, the British company VoIP Unlimited sustained a similar attack. The crooks in that case also identified themselves with equal implausibility as REvil. Another denial-of-service attack has hit North Carolina-based voice-over IP provider Bandwidth, which Bleeping Computer reports began experiencing outages on Saturday. Some reports have said the carrier, which provides telecom services to businesses, reports that service has returned more or less to normal, but Bandwidth's website, as of late this morning, was still reporting partial outages in its inbound calling services. A company notice says, quote, Bandwidth is currently investigating an incident impacting inbound calls from Verizon Wireless to the Bandwidth network. Inbound calls may experience intermittent failures, end quote. Giant Group, a large British umbrella payroll company, has, according to the Register, sustained a significant cyber attack that's delayed payment to many of the workers whose checks are routed through the firm. The incident began a week ago on September 22nd, and Giant appears not yet to have fully recovered. A notice on the company's site today indicates that they're almost there, but some problems remain. Quote, "We would like to sincerely apologize for the inconvenience and frustration you have experienced as a result of the cyber attack to our network on the 22nd September 2021. With instances related to a cyber attack, there are certain protocols that must be followed to ensure that the integrity of the investigation is not compromised, and therefore we unfortunately were unable to communicate with you as quickly and openly as we wanted to. We can confirm that our databases are encrypted." End quote. The company has been unusually tight-lipped concerning details of the incident and has implied that the nature of the attack required them to hold information closely. What that nature might be isn't clear. After all, the company hasn't released enough information for anyone to render an informed opinion. Giant is working with various third parties to remediate whatever issues are afflicting it. The company did issue interim payments processed outside its normal channels to some 8,000 workers on Friday, but there apparently remain some unsatisfied and unpaid contractors. Russian authorities have detained Ilya Sakov, founder and chief executive of cybersecurity firm Group IB, on suspicion of state treason, Reuters reports. Authorities searched Group IB's Moscow offices yesterday. TASS was authorized to quote presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov as saying the Kremlin was aware of the arrest from media reports, but that he had no further information to offer. Reacting to the alarming development, Group IB confirmed that authorities had been through their Moscow office this week. The company is confident that Sakov will be vindicated and that Dmitry Volkov will run the company during Sakov's detention. The company says it's continuing operations and that customers' data are safe in its decentralized infrastructure. Group IB has international headquarters in London, Singapore, Dubai, and New York. Founded in Russia, the company now regards Singapore as its primary headquarters. NSA and CISA late yesterday released guidance on how to configure and use virtual private networks safely and securely. VPNs provide access to protected networks and are therefore especially attractive targets for cyber attacks. Rob Joyce, director of cybersecurity at NSA, said, quote, "Exploiting remote access VPNs can become a gateway to large-scale compromise. We created guidance to help organizations understand what to look for when choosing VPNs and how to configure them to reduce the risk of being exploited. Use these recommendations to verify any VPNs are securely configured." End quote. The particular classes of threats to organizations using VPNs include, the fact sheet says, credential harvesting, remote code execution of arbitrary code on the VPN device, cryptographic weakening of encrypted traffic sessions, hijacking of encrypted traffic sessions, and arbitrary reads of sensitive data, such as configurations, credentials, or keys from the device. And these threats are often the entering wedge for more extensive and persistent attacks against networks. NSA and CISA advise avoiding dodgy VPN providers. They primly describe them as non-standard, and to look for standard protocols and strong encryption when selecting a service, and look for services that permit you to fully inspect them. Once a VPN is selected, the fact sheet recommends active hardening. Require only strong approved cryptographic protocols, algorithms, and authentication credentials. Reduce the remote access VPN attack surface. Protect and monitor access to and from the VPN. And finally, secure the network entrance. The document has detailed suggestions under each heading and is worth reading in full. The agency's 9-page fact sheet concludes, quote, "Remote access VPNs are entryways into corporate networks and all the sensitive data and services they have. This direct access makes them a prized target for malicious actors. Keep malicious actors out by selecting a secure, standards-based VPN and hardening its attack surface. This is essential for ensuring a network's cybersecurity." End quote. And who's the threat to VPNs? Nation states mostly, NSA and CISA says, and those two agencies would be in a position to know. And now, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. There's a reason more than half of today's ransomware victims end up paying the ransom. Cybercriminals have become thoughtful, taking time to maximize your organization's potential damage and their payoffs. After achieving root access, the bad guys explore your network, reading email, finding data troves, and once they know you, they craft a plan to cause the most panic, pain, and operational disruption. Ransomware has gone nuclear. The folks at KnowBe4 have an upcoming webinar that'll get you up to speed on ransomware. In this webinar, you'll find out why data backups, even offline backups, won't save you, why ransomware isn't your real problem, and how your end users can become your best last line of defense. Go to knowbe4.com/ransom to learn more about the webinar. That's knowbe4.com/ransom. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. Our UK correspondent Carole Theriault has been pondering online trolling. She joins us with this commentary.
So today I want to talk about cyber trolling. Why is it still a scourge out there? An article on trolling and the conversation suggests that online behavior is often characterized by a tendency to act in a less inhibited way than one might act in person. So they would maybe post abuse that they would never share if the person was standing in front of them. Research suggests that this lack of inhibition stems from our feeling of anonymity and invisibility online and the absence of any perceived authority to prevent us from misbehaving. Tom Langford, a security consultant at SentinelOne, had this to say.
Trolling has been a problem for humankind ever since we were able to communicate with each other without having to be face-to-face. Even more recently, last century, for instance, poisonous pen letters being sent through people's letterboxes in small villages, etc. It's a phenomenon that's been with us for a long time. So it's not surprising, really, that it hasn't changed much. It's probably on the increase now, though, because people are more isolated from each other. They grow, therefore, a lot more opinionated. And so, therefore, the trolling increases as people become more angry and more upset with the world around them.
In other words, we've all suffered during this global pandemic, some more than others. And if you're an unhappy camper, you may want to share your misery. Okay, so how to avoid trolling? There are two things that I would suggest. One, stay calm. Even if you're reading something that is so inflammatory and it makes your blood boil, do not respond. Do not engage, because the main rule is do not feed the trolls. Cyber trolls thrive on attention, and if you don't give them any, they may get bored and go bug someone else. And also be careful about sharing inflammatory posts and messages and articles. A lot of these are designed to get you to share because it's so crazy or outrageous or makes your blood boil. But effectively, you're becoming a pawn in the game by sharing this information with others. Do your research before you share. That's why Twitter's recent stop and think algorithm is interesting. It's trying to stop people sharing things based on having been clickjacked by the title. And number two, if you find yourself in the situation where you're a victim of cyber trolling, the two keywords are block and report. New tools to report abuse are improving all the time. Make sure you're familiar with them before you find yourself in this type of pickle. This was Carole Theriault for the CyberWire.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Ninjio. Are you still measuring the success of your cybersecurity awareness training program by the number of people who take simulated fish bait? That was yesterday's thinking. Reactive metrics don't provide an accurate indication of a true cybersecurity-aware culture. Instead, it's about proactive metrics that offer deep insight into how your employees are thinking about cybersecurity, what encourages them to report suspicious activity, and how often they are thwarting attacks. That's where Ninjio comes in. Through animated micro-learning episodes featuring celebrity actors, Ninjio empowers individuals and organizations to obtain the proactive skills, habits, and behaviors to truly become defenders against cyber threats. Let Ninjio show you how to create proactive cybersecurity-aware cultures from the inside out. New Ninjio episodes release every month. So head over to ninjio.com, that's Ninjio.com, to learn more and watch their latest episode for free. And we thank Ninjio for sponsoring our show. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by Johannes Ullrich. He is the Dean of Research at the SANS Technology Institute and also the host of the ISC Stormcast podcast. Johannes, it's always great to have you back. Over on the Hacking Humans podcast in particular, my co-host Joe Kerrigan and I often talk about SMS messaging and the varying degrees of security that come with it or perhaps do not, whether or not it's, better than nothing. You wanted to talk to us today about some out-of-band phishing that you've been tracking using SMS messages.
Yeah, so one thing that has been happening for a while is that you basically just got what amounts to a phishing message as an SMS message. The advantage for the phisher, of course, is that corporate mail filters and such usually can't look at SMS messages as they look at email. An interesting sort of combination we have seen lately is where the initial message arrives as an email, but then the message instructs you to send an SMS to a specific phone number, and then in return, you'll receive the actual phishing link that, if you click on it on your phone, will direct you to a fairly well done website that then, of course, asks you, in this case, for your Outlook 365 credentials.
I mean, that seems like a significant extra step here. What is the social engineering hook that they're using to convince you to do something like this?
Well, there are a couple of ways how they sort of made it a little bit more enticing, I think, for people to follow it. First of all, the message that you're supposed to send to this phone number actually included the company name. So you're almost feeling like you're authenticating to this phone number. Hey, it's actually me. I work for this company. And I think it was about getting your email allowance increased or one of these messages. So that's part of it. I think the other part is that phone companies are getting a little bit better in filtering some of that spam by not sending mass SMS messages to millions of users, but only sending them to people who actually responded to the initial email. They now have to send way less messages and may not trigger these filters. There is currently a big effort sort of among the phone companies to reduce some of the spam. Obviously, users complain about getting all these spam SMS messages, and they in general try to more or less eliminate any kind of automated messaging coming from a full 10-digit phone number without sort of paying extra, of course. That's the other trick to this. Right. Probably the spammers are trying to adapt to this a little bit by sending less messages, using stolen credentials without sort of running up a bill that's large enough where they would actually get flagged as fraudulent.
Yeah, it's fascinating, too, because if you are initiating the exchange, then when you get that message from the phishing folks, it's going to come back into one of your folders that it's from a known entity because you started it. You sent them the initial message.
Correct. That's exactly what also some of these fraud algorithms are looking for. If you initiated the message, then the reply, of course, can't be spam because you asked for it. So that's, I think, how they bypass some of these algorithms. And by also splitting the entire process between email and SMS, it's very hard for any kind of corporate security tool or such to correlate everything that's happening here.
So is the primary solution here? I mean, are we talking about, security awareness training or are there technical measures as well?
Security awareness training is part of it. And then, of course, yes, your credentials will get phished eventually. So better do something like multi-factor authentication. In a recent month, and so I looked at a couple of phishing sort of back ends where basically attackers are collecting the passwords. And the good news here is I see very few people falling for it. So maybe the education is sort of paying off for it, but it usually only takes like a day or less for a phishing site to get blocked and get the red warning screen. And before that, if it's often only like a dozen or so users that actually fall for your average, not very sophisticated phish.
All right, well, still something to be aware of. Johannes Ullrich, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible. And speaking of sponsors, stay tuned for a message from our sponsor, Arctic Wolf. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Paru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carole Theriault, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a message from our sponsor, Arctic Wolf. When it comes to mitigating the impact of a security incident, minutes matter. So the question is, how long would it take your organization to detect a ransomware attack? The answer could be the difference between business as usual and devastating consequences to your customers' bottom line and reputation. Learn how the Arctic Wolf platform and concierge security team can help your organization detect the undetectable, not in days or hours, but minutes. For the first time, take an exclusive look at how their experts investigated, escalated, and remediated a real-life ransomware attack on a local government organization. Visit arcticwolf.com/cyberwire to check out on-demand webinars, an interactive timeline, and find resources to help you learn how to continually improve your security posture over time. With Arctic Wolf, stop breaches before they disrupt business. Explore real-world examples at arcticwolf.com/cyberwire. And we thank Arctic Wolf for sponsoring our show.